And I wasn't prepared. I said, I didn't bring the right things to do this. And they say, oh, we don't care. And they immediately took their rings off or took off the earrings and handed it to me. What they were wanting, of course, Jamie, was to learn something about themselves. They didn't care that I could return their ring to them in a mysterious fashion. And that lesson is not just mine to learn. This kind of story has been related by other mentalists like, oh, you got to do the personalization of this thing to make it very meaningful. It is something that you have to learn, or someone has to tell you, a mentor, that is even more important than the returning of the item to the proper person.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Desert Island Tricks. We've got an interesting guest today, maybe not your typical performer, which I'm very excited about, because this gentleman is, again, I'm talking like you haven't read the title of this podcast. So you're going to know who this person is. But Terry is fairly prolific, certainly in the bizarre fields, and has rubbed shoulders with pretty much all of the greats, and also been published in many of the great bizarre books. All you need to do, rather, is take a couple of seconds to Google Terry online, and you'll find his name linked to lots of incredible books and different people. He typically plays with mentalism and bizarre magic. He has an excellent seance, which I hope one day I get to see in person. And I've had the pleasure of him being on an Alakazam-related product a few years ago, which is our yearly Terrifying Taboo series, which is an evening dedicated to bizarre magic. Terry came over from America, and fortunate for us, we all got to experience one of his seances that night. So, of course, this is the wonderful Terry Tyson. Hello, Terry.
Hello, Jamie. Do you know how wonderful it is to be able to talk to you? It's been a while, and we'll try to rectify that with a face-to-face meeting in 2025. But yeah, it'll be wonderful. And thank you so much for the invitation. I'm delighted and honored.
Thank you for coming on. I'm very excited to hear your list because I feel like it's going to be a step away from the norm, which is going to be lovely for me as a host, but also for listeners, because, magic's a very diverse and sophisticated field of different genres. And I think sometimes we overlook some genres because we feel like maybe they're not as commercial and not as well, sought after. But I think we both would agree that bizarre magic in particular is sort of a dying art, which has its roots in magic quite firmly. Certainly, if you go to the Magic Circle and you look around at some of the great performers of the past, nearly, I would say maybe 80% of those posters have some sort of spiritual or bizarre element to them.
Yes, and let me preface that bizarre magic has, I think, undergone a renaissance as of late, with increased performers wanting to perform seance, and a few great books coming out that could be labeled bizarre. And I think that the definition of what bizarre magic is has changed and come to what it means now, at least for myself, in that it is primarily a narrative-driven or storytelling type of magic. And so with that definition, one could say that David Copperfield, when he does some of his illusions that have a strong narrative thread going through it, is bizarre magic. And that is the direction that I have been going on for quite some time, because as Jamie knows, I love to talk and I love to tell stories. And if you could weave in, any magician who can weave in a interesting storyline to their magic, you can say that, yes, I perform bizarre magic. And also to preface or put a foundation, I've always bristled at the moniker that it has taken on of bizarre magic, because as in the early days, it really did look like a druid ceremony or a black magic mass. And then a lot of performers realized that that's really cool and really fun, but not too many people want to see it, or they think it's silly. So if you can make it more meaningful and make it matter through your storyline, you get the same result as for a bizarre magician. That you can qualify yourself as a bizarre magician. And that's why I love stories. Until I do mentalism routines primarily with a storyline. And we'll talk about that as we go along. But I just wanted to say that at the outset, Jamie.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I feel like people are overlooking the fact that bizarre elements are in pretty much all of our lives. Certainly in the UK, we've had a big surge of these ghost hunts. So the idea is that there's a haunted venue and they take you around. In fact, me and myself, Peter Nardi and Jenny Nardi did one last year at a haunted priory. And certainly down by me, we've recently had a theatre down by me, which is called the Barn Theatre in Oxted. They've just started ghost tours there. There seems to be sort of a big surge on them. In London, certainly you can go on ghost walks. You can go on Jack the Ripper tours, which are quite popular. There's quite a big surge in them. Obviously, horror films and ghost stories are a big thing anywhere in the world. It's a big market to tap into.
Indeed. Yes, in the States as well. Anything old in the United States is only like 200 years old, and as opposed to centuries. We're quite a young country in comparison to the rest of the world. And anything that's kind of old, or if there's a town that is old, folks will jump to the conclusion that, oh, this place must be haunted. So any older town or older city in America also has, through Google, you can find the ghost tours. They're very, very popular over here too. And some towns, for instance, Salem, Massachusetts, where the witch trials took place, it's almost like turf wars, like street gangs fighting for territory to say, no, we're the best one. No, we're the best. And some of them get kind of at times nasty to one another, but it's interesting to see that. But yeah, lots of ghost tours out here too.
And so there should be, because they are fascinating. But with that being said, let's let you in on the concept of the podcast in case this is the first time you've joined us. So the idea is that we are going to maroon Terry on a desert island. When he's there, he's only allowed to take 8 tricks, 1 book, and 1 non-magic item, which he uses for magic. The particulars, where it is, how many people there, how big it is, who he's performing to, etc. The island is built in Terry's imagination, so it can be whatever he wants. It's not really about that. It's pretty much the tricks that, if you can only perform them for your rest of your life, those are the tricks that you would perform. So with that being said, let's whisk you away, Terry, to your desert island and find out what's in your first position.
Well, number 1 on my list, it was interesting. I listened to Peter Nardi's list yesterday, and he mentions fourth dimensional telepathy as it was presented by Bob Cassidy. Now, I knew Bob when he was the pre-biker bar days, when he looked like an insurance salesman, and he was legal counsel. And then met him later. Now, we weren't pals. We talked many times, but we all know that his influence on mentalism excuse me, was quite remarkable. And I think that he should be one of those giants in which we stand on their shoulders, in addition to Max Maven and a few others. But I think that fourth dimensional telepathy, or I think better put, is the three envelope test, is so versatile. And there are half a dozen ways of doing it. But I think that it's so versatile that you could, and I have done an entire, say, 12-minute set during a gala show to do fourth dimensional telepathy. And I like it because I can incorporate design duplication, I can do direct telepathy, and then do a shared visualization, all using the three envelope test plot line. And certainly the way that Bob did it was outstanding. I do it, it's sort of an amalgam of other methods using envelopes. And most recently, I've been playing around with a product put out by Luch called Propelopes. My version, I do some prep work before I go on stage. And with Luch's product, it can be done, just walk out and just do it. I do need to work on this because it is not always that I can get to the audience before the curtain goes up. It is my favorite one. I've been doing it since the 1980s. So, you go with what's comfortable and what has worked. But I'm going to be looking more closely at Luch's product. I have it and watch the instructions. I thought, oh gosh, I gotta learn this and break some old habits. But that said, the three envelope test or fourth dimensional telepathy is number one on my hit parade.
And what a brilliant choice that is as well. In fact, it was only yesterday we were doing some filming at Alakazam, and I showed Harry Bob Cassidy's name and place billet test, two billet test essentially, and just how clever that is. I still think it's, arguably, depending on whether you agree with me or not, I still think it's probably one of the strongest billet routines that there is, just with two billets, nothing else. Well, within reason, two billets.
Right.
And the routine just feels so clean and fair. And a lot of the times that you see Bob Cassidy, he can perform these tricks to a small group or even one or two people, and then suddenly he's on a TV set and he's doing it in front of TV cameras or in a theatre somewhere. So these billet tests, for just a couple of little pieces of paper and some envelopes, he really gets everything out of performing them.
Yeah, he does get quite a bit out of it. And I think because he has laid the foundation, the performer can then take that basic premise and build on it and put a narrative to it. And it's so versatile, like I said, the three envelope test, but name and place, both are extremely versatile to create your own routine very easily.
Yeah, it's a superb first choice, and one, again, if you haven't discovered Bob Cassidy's work, because people could be listening to this years in the future, and they're just getting into magic and mentalism, do check it out. I know his books are hard to get by, but we're very fortunate that a lot of this is taught elsewhere. Certainly his Penguin lectures, he has a great billet, I think it's called Billet Killers, on Penguin Magic as well, which is really worth checking out because there's some superb material on all of those.
Amen.
And that brings us to your second position. So what are you kicking off in your second place?
The second place was, I think, the very best packet trick ever developed in the history of magic, and that is Wave by Max Maven. I don't think there's anything that gets as clean and as pure for a packet trick than that one. And magicians can do it. Mentalists can do it. If I wanted to spin a tale with it, I could. But Wave is just perfect. And that's it. That is the thing that you can say about that packet trick. And I often carry it with me. And I know it seems kind of odd when somebody says, "Well, can you do something?" And I pull out a little uh, folder or my wallet, and I've got a few cards in it. And I explain that I take this with me because it demonstrates some really interesting things about how people think, and use that premise to present it, and it kills every single time. I have if I that's I want that buried with me in my breast pocket as like, what's he going to take to meet Saint Peter? It's got to be this one, and he'll say, "Oh, that one, yeah, we've seen that about a billion times because every magician that comes up here brings that silly thing out."
Maybe that could be a future podcast, Death and Other Tricks, the tricks that you're going to take to the grave.
I love it. I
But
love it.
yeah, I agree. Max Maven has some great tricks. There's another trick. I think it's called. Is it called Pocket Nightmare? It's the one
Yeah,
where he places his hand behind his back. They
right.
break somewhere in the deck, which again is a phenomenal premise. But what's interesting about packet tricks, and one thing that I don't think people think about necessarily with magic is it's the perfect place if you want to get into storytelling to begin in a close-up situation, because why do you only have a couple of cards? What happened to the rest of the deck of cards? Those particular cards, why did you have those 4 or 5 cards or however many there are and not the rest of the deck? It's the perfect way to start justifying a prop in a story format in a close-up situation.
Amen. That's great. That's a good idea. And I often tell stories no matter what trick I'm doing. I probably maybe tell too many stories because I'm an old man. Old men like to chat. He's shaking his head. Well, thank you, brother. But yeah, pocket tricks lend themselves to short little stories that make it more interesting. And what's nice about Wave is that you don't come off as a finger flinger or talented with sleight of hand or anything. It's purely psychological, or it's telepathy or something of that nature. And there's no funny moves. It's clean. Most of the work happens. Well, all of the work happens directly onto the tabletop with just 4 cards, and to create this little minor miracle in front of them with just these cards, I think speaks volumes about how good that thing is.
Yeah, phenomenal trick. And I mean, in just your first 2 tricks, Bob Cassidy and Max Maven. So it shows you where you're going to go if you're listening and the influences behind them. These are big influences, huge influences, in fact.
Well, I've got the next influence is going to be strong as well.
Oh, that's a nice segue. So let's go straight into your third item. What's in the third position?
The third position is pseudopsychometry by Animan. At least he's the one I think that sort of named it that, and that's what we call it. And he describes it in his book as being one of the strongest feats of mentalism possibly to perform. And I happen to agree. The plot line of being able to pick up vibrations or emanations from an object from another person is so powerful to an audience when it's done right. I have seen it done poorly. I've performed it poorly in the past, but when it's done well, it looks again like a miracle. And what's also interesting about that premise is a lesson that I learned early on. I was performing for a lot of fraternal groups. This was back in the 80s. I was performing for fraternal groups where I would be the entertainment for the ladies auxiliary, and they had like the Oddfellows Club the lions and the elks and such. And they would have a small dinner, the ladies, because that was before they were allowed to be proper members, while the husbands and the boyfriends would go off into their ceremony room, probably to smoke cigars, drink whiskey, and Lord knows what. Um, and I would be the entertainment. And what I really, and I had a circuit uh, in Southern California, extending several counties, and I would get to each of those venues, those meeting places, at least twice a year, unless they asked me to come in for a special show. And I had done psychometry for during that first round of meetings. When I returned, I of course had to have another set to perform them, and it was a great learning opportunity for me to really learn new stuff and to improve. And I was finished, and this is the second round, and I was packing up my things, getting ready to leave. Oh, I will also mention this is a nice story in that if I could, at that time, they often had proper caterers that would bring the food in to feed the ladies. Sometimes I had a kitchen staff, depending on how rich that particular club was. And I would do something for them in the back, and they would fill the leftovers into Tupperware containers, and I could eat for another week. And at that time, that was important, because I wasn't making a lot of money doing this, but I was still doing it a lot. So I always appreciated doing something for the ladies, and it ended up being a lot of spaghetti meals during that time, and a bit of salad perhaps. But anyway, that's sort of a sidebar to I was putting things together, and a couple of ladies that I had met during the last trip in came up and they said, "Do that thing where you hold our rings and tell us about ourselves." And I wasn't prepared. I said, "Oh, I didn't bring the right things to do this." And they say, "Oh, we don't care." And they immediately took their rings off or took off the earrings and handed it to me. What they were wanting, of course, Jamie, was to learn something about themselves. They didn't care that I could return their ring to them in a mysterious fashion. And that lesson is not just mine to learn. It has been this kind of story has been related by other mentalists who perform pseudopsychometry, like, oh, you got to do the personalization of this thing to make it very meaningful. And Anneman didn't necessarily talk about that. So it is something that you have to learn, or someone has to tell you, a mentor, that that is even more important than the returning of the item to the proper person. To the extent that you don't have to return it at all. You can simply hold on to the item, talk about that person, then ask who it belongs to. So that is just as powerful. Now, there's multiple methods to execute this. Most recently, I saw some products by the 1914 D. Christopher called Pure Psychometry. Luca Volpe, Alan Wong, and Paul McCraig have come out with a product called multi-sensory bags that execute the same kind of, or facilitates this kind of effect. And then also it's sort of thinking about the basic plot line. And there's two other effects that come to mind that use the pseudopsychometry methodology and plot line in an interesting way. And I don't remember the name of the trick, but it's in Kennedy's book, Bairn. And it uses clipboards and drawings. And I thought that was very clever. And then most recently, in the last year or so, Luch came out with a project called The Lineup that basically uses, again, that foundation of pseudopsychometry as a basis for doing a really nice standing chair test that is really cool. So, psychometry is number 3, and I love performing it. I'll be lecturing on it at a workshop in Dallas, Texas, in September, I believe it is. And it's going to be a kind of an interesting thing. We've got 3 different lectures all concentrating on the psychometry routine or the presentation of psychometry. So I'm excited about that. When I begin my introduction to that routine, I mention the fact that, or the phenomenon that when you walk into a room, perhaps of strangers, and you can either feel welcomed or you can feel awed. And that's perhaps the energies that those in the room are emanating. Or when you go into an antique shop, sometimes, maybe it's just my imagination, Jamie, I don't know. Sometimes I feel strangely drawn to a particular object or like repelled by it because it's odd to me, and anyone else looking at it go, oh, this is a beautiful little figurine. I'm thinking to myself, no, I don't want that in my house. And actually, I make it personal in that I often carry a pocket knife that was carried by my father for a very long time. And seriously, Jamie, when I pull that pocket knife out, I can sense my dad's spirit or his feeling or the love that he gave me and my brother and sister that comes from that knife. And again, it's as real as the sun coming up for me when that happens. And it could be certainly just the memories of my father. And I started imagining things that he's doing or saying, and that he's now going to help me open up this package and cut this twine with this pocket knife. Or it's really my dad. And I don't try to analyze it too much and just accept it and feel it and enjoy that moment. So yeah, I often bring this little pocket knife. I have to be very careful to pack it in the proper luggage so that it doesn't get taken by some security agent at the airport and it's not on my carry-on, but it's packed. But that said, and I've done that almost a couple of times, excuse me, where I'm just about ready to leave the airport and I realize, oh, damn, that pocket knife is in my briefcase or my backpack, or it's in my carry-on, and I got to move it over, and I breathe a sigh of relief. And I think what that is my dad saying, don't be a dummy, fix it, Terry.
Yeah, very true. It's great. It's a great plot, and it's certainly one that people should look into if they've not looked into it. But that does bring us on to your halfway point. So what's in your 4th position?
I think that one of the at least fun for me and fun for an audience, and again, lends itself to storytelling, is the free will plot. And we can certainly look at Will to Read by Steve Della, which I think is absolutely brilliant, and it's lovely. I can carry it in my wallet and I can tell a story with that. But the basic plot line of saying you have 3 objects, one is going to be over here, you're going to be holding one of them, and I'm going to be holding the third based on decisions that you make, is quite remarkable. Most recently, I read a book by Gabriel Wharton, and I had no idea what it was about. It's called A Double Tour. It's a small booklet, but he takes the free will concept and develops it and has some really nice observations and subtleties, as well as handling of the reveals that I think are really quite brilliant. But the free will plot, again, it's great. It could be performed straight telepathy or precognition, but also easy to weave a tale into it quite easily. So the free will plot, bingo, that's it.
Yep, I agree. I remember growing up, there's a wonderful version by Jimmy Strange called Free Will of Order, which is it feels very, well, it is, it's just an impromptu little miracle. All you need is some pieces of paper. And most recently, actually last week, Simon Lipkin showed or taught a version in his online lecture, which was people going on holiday, which I loved. And you place all of these different places into an envelope, and then he says to you, right, you're gonna go somewhere, I'm gonna go somewhere, and one place we're gonna leave for another time, which I really liked. And then when you turn it over, it says, I really hope you enjoy your stay in Paris. I'm having a great time in Australia, and I can't wait till you join me and we go to Africa or wherever that third place is. Which, again, the concept, I love that it's such an adaptable concept, and it really can go. It can be a bizarre routine. It can be a really fun routine. If you're working for some businesses, it's a really easy one to adapt for a corporate setting or even a trade show. And you need minimal props, and it feels incredibly fair in every aspect.
Yeah. No, I think it's very versatile, like you said. It's just a really smart way of doing it. And it's difficult to reverse engineer if you do it correctly. And that's why I like it so much. But the idea of using it in a page of a book, for instance, as in what Mr. Della has created, that's carried in your wallet, and it can be threadbare, and just be crinkly and just barely able to, and falling apart, but still execute this wonderful reveal, I think is really fun. Very versatile. And that's interesting that you use the word versatile, because I think, with the exception just of a few items on my list, I tried to be, okay, I'm on a desert island. I've got to make the most of what I can with what I'm allowed to bring onto my case, because I'm going to be stranded for a bit. And it's like, okay, what routines can I do and modify more readily than something that is very straight, one way to do it, and that's it. Of course, Brave is one of those. It's basically just kind of one way, but free will is very versatile.
It's also a plot that you could make it as complex or as simple. I mean, not that I would recommend performing it this way, but even just one word would do the same thing. Mine, yours, theirs. That's all you need, and it will still make sense. So it's just an incredibly versatile plot and effect.
Hello guys, I'm here to talk to you about Alakazam Unlimited. This is the best streaming platform in the world, I'm telling you now. With Alakazam Unlimited, you get access to over 150 magic routines. This is video performances and explanations. We have card magic, coin magic, kids magic, rope magic, mentalism, stage, parlor, impromptu. We've got you covered. All of this for the low price of just £4.99 a month, and you can cancel at any time. Perfect if you've got commitment issues. Yes, I'm talking to you. Guys, you are going to absolutely love it. If you haven't joined the platform already, what the heck are you doing? Alakazam Unlimited is a streaming platform that you need to be a part of. Not only that, there is also exclusive content only available on the platform. Check it out now, alakazam.co.uk. Cheers.
And that takes us over your halfway point to your fifth position. What's in your fifth position, Terry?
I'm going to be extremely versatile here, and I'm going to label this fifth one as Q&A, the question and answer act. I love doing it. You always can get better no matter how many times you do it. There are multiple ways to execute it, but it's extremely powerful. I try to do the best I can with the information that I've got at the time to give the response the respondent a meaningful uh, answer to my question, to their question, as well as reveal something about themselves. As most mentalists learn, and even magicians can learn, that the audience really likes hearing something about themselves. And when the performer incorporates their personality, their interest, their future, their past into a response during Q&A, they're going to love you and just think, oh, that's a nice chap. Or I want to have drinks with this fellow because he's so great, or he made me feel really good. And if, as a mentalist, if you can impart a good feeling, a powerful and positive intention to an audience, I think there's no loftier goal. I often hear magicians like, I want to give them a sense of wonder. And I think that's a little highfalutin, and yeah, good luck with that. But if I can give my audience a sense of belonging and a sense of positive feelings, that is my goal. So when they leave, they feel good about life, and they, even if it was just for the hour, or if it's a 20-minute set, that they felt good by the end. And if I fooled them, great. If I didn't, did they still feel good and receive that physical or psychic pat on the back, saying, "Yeah, you've got it going on. You're doing okay. You have accomplished a great deal." And that is always my aim when I'm performing, even seance. If I can give them a positive feeling at the end, excuse me, a resolution to the issue at hand, or through the experience, they had something unique and they felt good about it. Hey, I'm job done. Give you my check. So yeah, Q&A. That's a big, broad umbrella, but it is definitely something I would add to my desert island list.
So I did warn you at the very outset of this that I would be devil's advocate. And now
Okay.
is one of those moments, Terry. So if I had to push you for a certain Q&A, or maybe, I know Q&A is a slightly more complex version because a lot of it is about maybe structure or routining rather than methods all the time. But if you were to take a certain Q&A with you and you can only do that certain Q&A, what would it be, or what influences have made that Q&A?
I'm using the Burling Hall method. And Burling Hall created this method which uses different pieces of folded card. And I have had those specially printed, and there's seven different questions that are asked on the cards that I'm using currently. And I can use all of them, or I can say, for this audience, I'm going to use just these. For instance, on some of the cards, it says, what is something about you? What is a fun fact about you? And you get some really good stuff. And you learn something about that individual. Others would be, who do you miss most in life? Another one would say, what do you want to know about your future? What is your strongest wish or desire? I'm trying to go through all the questions that are on the cards here. Where would you like to travel to next? And there's a couple more. And I've got easily, it depends on how it's going, I can go a good strong 15, maybe 20. After a while, people can become a little bored with it. And you have to be very good at keeping the entire audience engaged when you're just talking to one person. And that's not easy. And again, sometimes I hit the mark, sometimes I miss it. I am very self-aware in that regard. And then when I see that this is not hitting with the rest of the audience, it's really wonderful for the first 5 people that I've interacted with, but the rest of the audience, like, okay, MRA, moving right along, I switch up to something else. But I also like Q&A in that you can, the reveal can be done multiple ways. Again, a visualization. It can be, let's share a dream. Let me reach into your mind and pluck a thought, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, the Burling Hall method is the one that I'm using. I like it because it's sort of built in with a change, a different potential responses built in, and I can just mix up the cards. They're picked up. They get a pen, and often I have my own logoed pens, and they get to keep the pen, so they remember who I am. But I also say that another method, I've been interacting quite a bit with Luch lately. He's got a new product out. It's actually been out for a while, called Frameworks. And it uses multiple methods to achieve you knowing what they want to know about themselves. I don't want to give too much away. It's not mine to give away. But yeah, I would say both of those have a lot of potential. Another one is as simple as you can do it on the back of business cards and just do a one ahead and go from there.
Absolutely. And what I think is lovely about Luch's frameworks, I mean, arguably Q&A is jazz mentalism, right? Because there typically isn't really a structure. You're sort of going with what's happening in the room. Luch's approach gives it structure, hence frameworks. All the way through there is structure. But I know that Jermaine talks in one of his DVD sets quite a bit about Q&A, and he has a wonderful book that you can still find it. It's called Passages, and that's a great way of looking at Q&A as well, because that is a method that you keep in your head that isn't a physical, structured, prop-based Q&A system. It's really difficult to talk about without giving things away, but essentially by mixing a magical method as well as the knowledge from books like that, it allows you to intersperse between different methods and maybe feel a little bit more confident at the prospect of going into a Q&A, because it's quite a scary thing to do for the first time. So yeah, finding those structured methods. There are some really clever ones out there, but certainly Luch's is really worth an invested look, and so is Luke Jermaine's approaches as well. They're both really, really good. But I'm not actually familiar with the Burling Hall method, so thank you, Terry. I will be looking at that myself going forward.
Yes. I'll also mention there's passages by Gail Sheehy that Jermaine does reference, and it is a brilliant book. It should be required reading of every mentalist or anybody who's doing palmistry, tarot, or any oracle. You have to have that book and have read it multiple times and reread it every so often. The other source of that kind of information, and it's a name that's going to be familiar with a lot of magicians, are the publications by Richard Webster from New Zealand. And his psychometry from A to Z is also brilliant in that regard. So I would definitely recommend that if you're doing, I should have mentioned it when I was talking about pseudopsychometry, but if you're doing any kind of oracle type of effect, that you definitely need Richard Webster's books, and indeed look at Jermaine's approach. And I would also say, and backtrack just a little bit when it comes to psychometry, Germain has a wonderful publication, a stage presentation for psychometry in his book or his release, Vibrations. And it's not so good in a parlor situation, but it is really good on stage. So I will mention that.
Great choice. And that brings us on to number 6. What's in your 6th position?
Again, large umbrella, because I'm going to cover a lot of things here. And it's going to be or bottle pendulums. If I could only pack one of those, I would have to pick a bottle pendulum. There you are. That looks familiar. He's showing me, for those who just are listening, he showed me a bottle pendulum I believe I gave to you.
Yeah, you did give to me, and it stays on my bookshelf. So I have lots of, directly next to me, I have a bookshelf, and I have lots of sort of weird things on it from, spirit bells. I've got 2 spirit bells over here. I've got 2 Ouija boards over here. So yeah, lots of strange things. But I always, ever since you gave it to me, I actually have several of your bottle pendulums. So I have bottle pendulums, which we actually used in a show last year. But I keep my little jar pendulum next to, I've got a haunted doll down there as well, and a Ouija board. So I keep everything sort of together. And one night, if I wake up and that little jar is banging on the edge of the other jar, I know that I need to move house quickly.
Yes, or call me in to, quote, clean your house of spirits.
There you go.
Yeah, you'll get the friends and family discount.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, bring sage. Thanks.
Yeah. So, but bottle pendulums, you can use a bottle pendulum as a proper pendulum for divination, for dowsing, things of that nature. You could use it to reveal a selected thing by an audience member, whether it's a card or reveal their signature that exists on one of several cards. But bottle pendulums can also be used as potentially an oracle device. But it's also I like it for spirit contact and evidence that spirits are in the room. It's very powerful. And especially if you demonstrate the pendulum as it is being held with by a person in their hands, and then you place that same pendulum inside a bottle where no human hands can touch it, and it starts to move, we can say that could be an energy that we don't completely understand. Spirits may be interacting with the little bob that's at the end of the chain inside that bottle. And I think it's very versatile. And again, since my list was only 8, I had to think, what can I do? What's the most I can do with this list? And so I had to use pendulums. And pendulums, good night, nurse. We could talk for 3 days solid on that very topic. I use it to teach workshops to the metaphysical community. I've written short booklets for the lay public on how to use their recently purchased pendulum from me to do spiritual work or to do revelations to their psyche and maybe tap into their intuitions. In fact, the method that I call it is called the CSI method, the cognitive, subconscious, and intuitive. And it's a journey that someone takes with a pendulum using both of those 3 precepts in mind to get more and more out of their recently purchased pendulum. So, yeah, pendulum work. I mean, again, I know there are books written on it, just on pendulums. There are DVDs. I think Mark Salem was one of the first DVDs that I saw on the topic. I hope it's still available because it's quite remarkable. And Mark is a little quiet these days, but the work he did with pendulums early on, it's just great. And if a performer, especially a mentalist or a bizarrist, is not using pendulums, get on the train and punch that ticket and do it, because an audience really loves it. I actually used it when I was doing more and more public speaking engagements for corporate audiences as a demonstration of a positive corporate culture, and used it to illustrate how we can create this positive culture using a pendulum on stage. And then that is then transferred to pendulums that are held by members of the audience. And when you get an entire audience with a pendulum in their hands and they're dancing about, it's quite powerful. It's quite remarkable to see. And I get delight out of it because I know that they're enjoying it as well.
Yeah, it's superb. Last year, I very much try to make these podcasts not about me and always the guests, but when me and Terry talk, it's always really nice just to shoot different ideas between us. So last year I did I basically wrote a play is the answer. It was a 2-hour play with magic throughout, but it's a ghost story with several twists throughout. And during that, there's this wonderful scene where I ask the audience if there is someone who has had a paranormal experience. Now, when you ask that to an audience, that's a great way to get those people up onto stage and know that you're going to get a reaction, right? Because you're canvassing your audience essentially for people who have already suggestible, put it that way. Much like in hypnotism, people use the finger test with an audience. That's a great way to automatically know that people are going to respond well. If they think they've had a paranormal experience, things are more likely to happen on stage. But the theatrics of it was there's some choral music which comes over the sound system and a stained glass window, so it almost feels very church-like. And I go up to those people and I have a shoelace, and on the shoelace is a large bolt, because the bolt is actually part of the story. It happens in a fairground. And I literally just give each person one of the pendulums, and they stand up on stage where they are bottom lit. So there are small LED spotlights shining up on them, and I'm nowhere to be seen, so I'm not on the stage. I simply instruct them from the audience, so it's all about them. But there's this just beautiful moment where these 3 people are on the stage with this stained glass window with this beautiful choral music, and suddenly these things just start moving on their own, and it's all about their reaction. And every single night their reaction was amazed, shocked, bewildered, overwhelmed on some nights. It was always so incredible, and that's just from a pendulum, something on a piece of string.
Yeah, and truly, if we're honest with ourselves, there's very few visual things that a mentalist can do. A lot of it is just focused on the performer or focused on the participant and getting physical or mental reactions from them, but actual manifestation of something from a mentalist. Maybe a key bend, a haunted key that moves, but a pendulum is so. It's God. I hate to say this. Pack small, plays big, because it can be seen, across a stadium.
So that brings us on to the tail end of your tricks. So we've had some incredible ones straight away, fourth dimensional telepathy, pseudo psychometry, Q&A, all big hitters. So I'm intrigued to see where you're going to go at the tail end. What's in your 7th position?
Again, one of those utility things, so I can do a lot with a little. And in the broad category, I'm just going to say wallets, cases, and envelopes with the word peak before all of those words. And you can do so much with different wallets, such as the Sight Unseen case by Mark Strivings. It has been around for quite some time, but it's still one of my favorites to use in performance, to gaining information. I will mention, and like I said, I listened to Peter Nardi's podcast the other day, and he mentioned fourth dimensional telepathy. And I made this list before I listened to Nardi's interview, and the stealth assassin wallet. Oh my goodness, it is so brutally good. It really, really is, and you can do so much with it. And my mate Luch came out with the Blink 1 and Blink 2. And again, very easy to use. You can do multiple plot lines with it to gain information that you need from a participant. And I will tell you that during lockdown, I had purchased Blink 1 from Luch, and myself and some friends had scheduled a whitewater rafting trip down the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon. And we went down the river basically from the Phantom Ranch area. And Americans who are familiar with the river, we went from Phantom Ranch all the way to the end. And the trip was about 6 days. And we were going through some very, very dangerous rapids. Our float group was the first one down the river since the beginning of the pandemic. They got permission from the national parks and as well as the local authorities to do this because it was primarily an outdoor activity. And it was a very, very difficult trip in that extreme heat. It was, for Americans, I'm going to use the Fahrenheit, it was 115 degrees Fahrenheit on the river, on the surface of the water. And it was a relief to go through a rapid where you get inundated and almost drowned from the water, splashing over the edges of the raft. And it was hot. It was miserable. We had scorpions that were sleeping under and on. It was pretty brutal. One campfire, somebody, one of my friends said, he's a magician. Well, he's a mind reader. And the river guides said, oh, yeah, well, do something. And I happened to have Luch's Blink 1 with me. And I did a reveal of some very personal information with permission. I always get consent on this to one of the river guides, and she was blown away. It wasn't till about every few months she'll send a note saying, that was really good, Terry. And hey, when are you coming back to the river and all of that? And then it was 2 years later that she came back and said, you know what? It still blows me away. I don't know how you knew this about me and my friends. So it was very versatile, and I was able to use it in pretty dim light, as a matter of fact, because we're just around a campfire and I pulled it off. So I'm a fan of that particular piece of kit. I love it much. So anyway, in that category of wallets, cases, or envelopes, and you can certainly do the same thing with a piece of paper and an envelope. But I do like the physical and tactile feeling and just the presentation of a proper leather wallet or case that makes me look fancy, I suppose. And I would definitely say that's got to be number 7 as something I'm going to bring on my island because I can use it for so many, many things. I've actually used those in the presentation of seance as well.
So being devil's advocate, because we've had quite a few people say this item, if you could only perform one routine with your wallet, what would it be?
A memory. Share a memory that's one of your favorite memories.
Great.
It's very personal. It can become visual. I can be next to that person, for instance, and say, let's relive that memory together. And I will bring up things, sights, sounds, smells, um, the what that memory looked like and felt like, smelled like, and it becomes a very strong piece of mentalism just with very little information. And it is, again, going back to Q&A, sort of jazz mentalism, is that you go down a track and you follow one rail spur off to the right. If that doesn't work, you go back to the left. But at the end, you reach your journey in which the revelation is more meaningful than just saying, oh, your favorite bicycle when you were 4 years old. Nah, that's, to me, that you've wasted a wonderful opportunity to create a personal, meaningful experience for that person that you're working with.
Absolutely. Great choice again. And the idea of a memory reveal, superb. But that takes us on to your last effect. So what's in the last position?
The last one is, again, one of those umbrellas. I'm going to say Desire by Max Maven, which is also, in a sense, a living and dead test. And the same plot line could be used with Ned Rutledge's voice print that is long unavailable, but you can learn it. But the basic plot line, as we know, is that you have multiple choices available to your participant, and they choose one. And you reveal it, or you use that to create an entire framework of, or foundation for, this interesting revelation. And it could be done through touch. It could be done through multiple means, so that at the end, it's like it's more than the sum of its parts. It's easy to gain a piece of information from an audience member, but how you share that is remarkable. But a living and dead test plot line is very, very versatile. And it came to mind, like, where did I remember where this basic premise is available? And of course, Desire by Max Maven, it was the very first effect in the very first book that he released in the Blue Book of Mentalism, when he did his color series. It's now available, of course, collected in Prism, collection of all of those books, slightly updated. But also, there's a Ross Johnson DVD, and if Alakazam doesn't carry it, see if you can get it, because it's great. It's called Simply Psychic, and the methods are very, very plain and straightforward. But he basically, and he calls it voice print, because he uses that as a foundation for doing what in essence is a living and dead test. And then I wish I could remember the DVD and the name of the effect by Mark Spellman, in which he does a double lift. He does a couple of other things, a nail nick, to reveal a piece of information from his participant. I think it was in a record shop. I don't have it at my fingertips. It's well worth looking into. Spellman is extremely creative. He's extremely talented, and I'm one of his fanboys. Like I am with Germain, I think they are equally as creative, talented, and dynamic a performer. But anyway, the living and dead test, but then expanded out to a broader presentational style. But the basic plot, the foundation for all of those is, in essence, a living and dead test.
Great choice. Big fan of living and dead test as well, funny enough. Isn't that strange? Great choice. So, fourth dimensional telepathy, we've got Wave by Max Maven, psychometry, free will plot, Q&A, pendulums, peak wallet, desire. Excellent, really interesting selection there, and the majority of them have a very sort of impromptu feel to them, really. It's almost like you could turn up somewhere, look like you have nothing on you, and perform an incredible hour-plus show.
Yeah. I will say on the using the basic methodology that I changed considerably, however, to voice print on the Simply Psychic DVD by Ross Johnson. I have done it during Christmas time, and I have one person think about someone they wish were here for Christmas. Now, I don't ask them, have they died? That doesn't matter. It's just like, I wish they were here. Because sometimes I do get someone who's perhaps their parent has passed, or a favorite uncle or aunt. And other times it's just, oh, my friend, he lives on the other coast, and I wish they were here with me during Christmas time. And invariably, maybe it's the season. I'm going to say it's the season rather than my incredible powers of presentation. But I get tears, because people are, it's a happy time, but also it's a time of reflection for folks. It's at the end of the year. Christmas is special, and they have memories of Christmases past, and it can become a very powerful piece of mentalism.
All of your choices are right up my street. But I'm really interested to find out at this point what your book is.
I think before we started recording, I mentioned the fact, Jamie, that I'm a bit of a disadvantage in that all of my books are currently in storage, with the exception of a few that I picked up since Susan and I moved from California to the East Coast, and we are still awaiting our house to be finished being remodeled. The house actually was perfectly move-in ready, but it wasn't our style. It was more traditional, and Susan and I have a more mid-century modern and contemporary aesthetic. So we went through, and every single room is being touched to reflect us. And we have all of our possessions, 99% of our possessions are in storage until the end of June. And we're recording this in May. And they've been on those pods since November. So I'm going off of memory in some of the books that I bought since the move. And so I'm going to mention several and then zero in on one and the reason why. So the first one, or the first two, are by Mark Strivings. He has got an encyclopedia-like mind, and he produces some really fine compilations of effects that have been previously released or now in public domain, or reprinted with permission and reworked, often with his aesthetic tossed in. But the first one is the Business Card Compendium by Mark Strivings. And then he does a book on living and dead tests called The Quick and the Dead. And he reaches back into history as well as more up-to-date things for both of these topics. And they're pretty thick. They are hefty volumes. You could use it to weight down, your car from blowing away, perhaps. I don't know. They're pretty hefty books, but just a wealth of information. I'm a big fan of Strivings, and I've known him for many, many years. The next one is The Garden of the Strange by Caleb Strange. And it got mixed reviews in that it was a strange book. No pun intended. But it's magic and mentalism and perhaps even bizarre magic with ghostly things tossed in that have a strong narrative structure. And that really appealed to me. The most recent book that I got that's sort of in that same category, it's not as thick, but I think it's just as delightful, is called Tales from the Invisible Door by Vito Gatturio. And I apologize to Vito if I have garbled his last name. He's an Italian mentalist. I don't know the man. We've chatted online, but I picked up his book and I thought, oh, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful book. Again, narrative driven, mentalism primarily. I would say Prism by Max Maven, which is a collection of all of those color series books into one volume. A mate of mine, Paul Prater, wrote some great books. And again, it's very narrative driven. So, and his book is called Embryos. And I looked online to see if it's still available, and it's not. But I reached out to him and goes, oh, yeah, just look me up on Facebook. I've got my backstock. And if anybody's interested, he's got several of his books still available directly through him. And then the one that made me fall in love with Luc Germain, even with his typos, is 3510. And it was a revelation into his thinking. And I was sort of late to the game when it came to Germain, but I read that on a flight, just as he indicated that he wrote it on a flight 3510, either going home or heading to the States. I'm not sure which, but 3510, I think, is just a brilliant book. And it goes into his approach to dual reality and other things. And I just fell in love with Germain and his thinking. Fortunately, I got to attend last May a workshop put on by Vanishing Ink in Tuscany at an old priory, and got to spend some time with the man and found him to be engaging, enchanting, very, very generous with his information. And we actually worked on some staging for a psychometry act that was very helpful. But that's when, so they say you don't want to meet your heroes. Well, and I was a little afraid of that because I didn't know the man, but got to meet him. And now I'm still enamored of the fellow. But of those several books, I looked at my list, and I will zero in on Garden of the Strange by Caleb Strange, because he provides you with different performing scenarios and venues from the outdoors. I mean, he starts out when you're in the woods and you're doing something for a group of friends and weaving a tale, and then others that is a one-on-one situation. And I just like the way he thinks. I don't know if it's still available or not. You might be able to get it on eBay or something, but I think it's a brilliant book. The reason that it got, I think, mixed reviews is that it was not trick specific as much as presentation specific. And I know most magicians, they want to learn tricks. And that's important, of course, but also to expand your imagination and to expand the style in which you can present that trick, I think, is more valuable than learning the trick itself. So, yeah, Garden of the Strange by Caleb Strange. I hope I get to actually meet the person who wrote this. I don't think that's his real name, but I hope I get to meet him someday.
Yep, it's a very out there book. Certainly one that you will never come across again. I don't think in our industry. But yeah, I think that one of the first ones as well, he's talking about sort of being outside with a lot of people, almost in a ceremonial environment, which, yeah, it's a very interesting book. It's a very good choice. But equally, lots of really heavy hitters in there. 3510, yep, incredible. I'll be looking up the Quick and the Dead. I think that sounds really interesting as well. So yeah, really, really good choices. But it brings us on to your curveball item, the item that we never know where it's going to go. So what is the non-magic item that you use for magic?
So I'm going to name 3 and choose 1. That sounds like a plot line to a mentalism routine?
It actually does, yeah. It's like the new patio force. There you go.
Yeah, that's it. So, in fact, I will give you the opportunity to guess which one. Okay? The first one is a small alcohol still. I mean, I'm going to be on a desert island, and Mr. Tyson likes to have his adult beverage at the end of the day, and I could probably use the resultant spirits that come out of that still to create magic in the minds of my friends. I could certainly start, you know, fires with it, things of that nature. But I thought, yeah, I'm going to be on a desert island. Yeah, small still might be fun. The next one is going to be the next one is a different, it's a category, and it's going to be poetry. I think poetry is not only, if I'm going to be on that desert island, I love poetry. I want to have it so I can read it and just feel good about it, feel good about thinking and reflect on life and things of that nature with poetry. And the poets would include Walt Whitman, Shelley, Edgar Allan Poe, Wordsworth, Tennyson, and Wilfred Owen. And also that poetry also can be used as the in your script. I often use poetry in my scripts to recite a bit of a poem. Well, you remember, Jamie, when I do my seance, I start with a poem, reciting a poem, and using that as the jumping off point for the rest of the seance. So poetry. And then the last one, it's again a category. I would say it's not poetry, it's not fiction, but it is almost philosophical in nature. And in that category would be the autobiography of Mark Twain, the collected works of Emerson or Margaret Fuller. That category reflects a perspective on life that I happen to appreciate and try to live by. You know, Emerson was an American transcendentalist writer. He was sort of like the first guy to write in America to write a self-help book. And the advice that he gives of connecting with the universe and connecting with nature, I think is it's a philosophy that I live by, and in the importance of the interconnectedness of all of those things with the universe. I think it makes a difference in a person's life to come to that realization. I tossed in the autobiography of Mark Twain because it's a fun read. I don't know if I could use it in magic or not, but it's certainly a fun read. But that's the three sections that I might choose. And I'm going to give you the opportunity, my friend, to reveal which of those three do you think it is.
So, I've seen many a picture of lovely cocktails and small tumbler glasses with liquid in from yourself. So, I understand that. Mark Twain is interesting because it feels like you've just found a loophole in this podcast, in that no one has ever said that they want another book in that position. But theoretically, that is a non-magic item that you could use for magic. So, fair play. However, I would probably select poetry for a couple of different reasons. Number one, poetry is great for reflection in yourself. Two, it's great and enjoyable to read. But three, it's also enjoyable for other people to listen to and to read themselves. So it feels like you would get a lot more from poetry over the other two, in my eyes. But I'm interested to see which one you're going to pick.
Poetry. I love the poets. And if I had to pick just one of those, I'd probably get the biggest, damn thickest book of poetry that I could to get onto the desert island. So I have a lot of fodder for thought. And again, you could use it for your scripts. You could use it for a book test. You could use it just for enjoyment, and on and on. So yeah, it's poetry. Absolutely, it is.
Very, very good choice. And overall, a really, really excellent list. I think a bit different to other things that we've had, which is what we were expecting at the beginning, and I'm very thankful for, because it's a really intriguing look into your world of magic and bizarre explorations. And certainly there are a couple of things on there that I'm definitely looking into. For example, I'm looking into the Berlin Hall method, and I'm definitely looking into the Quicken the Dead book as well. So thank you for putting me onto those. But if anyone wants to find out more about you, Terry, where can they go?
I have a website that's in multiple parts, but it is tysoninsight.com. That's my sort of like business website. And I certainly will accept, and there's a contact form there. They can use my business email, which is terry@tysoninsight.com. Or just reach out to me via Facebook, easy to find there, or an email. I do not mind emails to tysoninsight@gmail.com, and I will definitely be responding. Now, I will tell you that because of our travel schedule and our moving schedule, and we stay busy. Susan and I stay very, very busy. So it may be a day or two before I can respond at any length. And I tend not to take my computer with me when we travel. I like to write out things longhand. I think it's a more effective method for me to write down thoughts and things on a pad as opposed to fingers to keyboard. I translate that into the keyboard, of course, after I get back to my computer. But I do use my phone for short messages, and I'll respond as soon as I can if you reach out. It'd be my absolute pleasure. And again, I'm praying to the magical gods that you and I and Peter and the rest of my mates that are my beloved mates in the UK, that will see you in 2025.
I very much hope so. And we were actually talking a few days ago, myself, Terry, and Pete, about potentially trying to find a venue for Terry to put on his show, his seance, whilst he's over here. So if that is a case, jump on those tickets, because I think it's going to be something that you do not want to miss, especially if you're in the UK and you're UK based and you're unlikely to be able to experience it over in America. I know certainly I'm incredibly excited at the prospect of being able to be in an audience witnessing it. So I really hope so. I really do. But that being said, thank you so much, Terry, for your time and for sharing your list with us all.
Well, thank you for the honor and the pleasure of chatting with you at length. It has been some time, and this was fun. And I like I said, I miss you. I miss the whole gang at Alakazam and several of my friends in the UK. And I can't wait to see you and embrace you and give you a longer than comfortable hug when we see each other. But thank you again. It was an absolute pleasure. Absolutely.
Amazing. So thank you all for listening. Of course, please remember to review this if you can. If you're enjoying it, please let everyone know that you're enjoying it. And with that being said, we will see you again on another episode of Desert Island Tricks. Goodbye.
Hi, Peter Nardi here, and I really hope you enjoyed that podcast. I just wanted to let you know that Alakazam have their own app. You can download it from the App Store or the Google Play Store. By downloading the app, it will make your shopping experience even slicker at Alakazam. You'll also get exclusive in-app offers and in-app live streams. So go download it now, and we'll see you on the next podcast.